Okay, so I think we'll just start off now. So first of all, welcome everybody. This is the seventh installment of the Marco webinar series, and it is on the topic of maximising opportunities with tea with your beverage business. Today we'll be speaking to Oscar Woolley of Suki Tea Makers and Emilie Holmes of Good and Proper Tea. So guys, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Oscar, and I'm from Nottingham originally, but I moved to Belfast 22 years ago, and 18 years ago I set up a tea business called Suki Tea. We predominantly look after hospitality, but have some online home customers too.
Hi, I'm Emilie. I'm founder of Good and Proper Tea. Only been going a short 10 years compared to Oscar's 18, but we're a specialty, London-based specialty tea business. I guess our mission is to get more people drinking great tea. So we source teas from 13 regions around the world, and then we focus again primarily on food service, and then also have a growing community of loyal customers at home too.
Okay, and perfect. And I am Emer, and I am the marketing, digital and events executive here at Marco. And just before we get into things, there's just a few house rules. So firstly, we're going to be answering questions at the very end for about 5 or 10 minutes. So if you have any of those, just put them in the chat box and we'll try and get to as many as we can towards the end. Also, if you have a camera on or are muted, have your camera on, just mute it. And just for the duration of the webinar. And also, we are going to be recording this webinar and putting it on our social media for anyone who can't watch it today. So that brings us to our first topic, which is, why is now the time for tea? Oscar, if you'd like to just jump into that and let us know.
Like the teas, well, the time for teas, it's always been the time for tea for me. You know, tea's exciting, but why is it exciting at the moment? I suppose that's what we're looking at. As tea business owners, you're immersed in a world of tea and you get to see the journey and the growth of that. But right now, specialty tea is attracting young, educated and health-conscious consumers. And it's consumer-led. So we've got a follow-on of businesses looking at specialty tea. I think it's really about retailers and coffee shop owners being awakened to what specialty tea can do. Mm-hmm. So that's consumer-led. I suppose we're in the rise of the savvy tea consumer. We've got a changing opinion of what good tea looks like, that people have had a taste of it. And I'd say that the indie coffee shop owners are starting to pay attention and in essence, play catch up to what the chains who saw this happening a long time ago have started. For example, Starbucks bought Teavana in 2012 for 667 million US dollars. They knew what the consumers wanted, so they worked ahead of that. There's a report that's just out, so there's some really interesting data gathered, and it's the Allegro report. It was out in July 22. This is consumers that have kind of fed into this, as well as business owners. But the kind of overarching feel of it was that presentation and delivery, I'm just reading this from the report, presentation and delivery were key factors that were important to consumers when discussing their favourite tea beverage experience, with visitors enjoying having their tea served in pot and saucer as opposed to mug. So there's a big thing about the ritual of tea as well. Mm-hmm. Coffee shops this is a quote from a consumer. Coffee shops are making an effort to be ethically conscious of the origins of their tea. Last time I had tea, I was given a pot to myself and just tea leaves. It was excellent and lasted ages. I like that one. So, you know, a lot of this is about experience. Emilie and I have had a bit of a head start at this, and Suki and Good and Proper Tea, both established companies with a strong, broad UK and Irish customer base. And I suppose for a very good reason, there are more and more specialty tea companies emerging. But everybody's working towards this common goal, which is essentially to upgrade the tea experience in hospitality because consumers are demanding it. Mm-hmm. So if we look at why they're leaning towards specialty tea, health, the experience, which we just touched on, provenance, variety, I'll cover a couple of these. So we looked, again, this is data from the Allegro report. if you look at health, you've got kind of mindfulness, clean eating, healthy habits. The first, there was some percentages around this. The first, I think, the go-to reason for people choosing tea when they're out and about was functional. That came in at 60%. So I want a drink with my food, I was thirsty, it's part of my routine, that kind of functional aspect. Then the second tier was there's an emotional connection. So I wanted something indulgent, I wanted something to relax, it's part of my favorite beverage. Third was social, meeting with friends, or suggested via social media to share something, to share a moment with somebody else. And then the fourth was energizing. So health boost, improve my productivity, or to perk me up, wake me up, or something like that. So it's really interesting to see why people are choosing this. And again, so I don't want to keep going on with the stats. This is the last of them for a while. 50% of UK tea brands are purchased by millennials. So we've got this demographic of 24 to 35-year-olds leading, I suppose, a desire for health and wellness. It's top of their agenda. We've got COVID, post-COVID era, and I think that's likely to remain for the foreseeable future. But a lot of it's about the functional aspect, and then we've got the emotional. So they're the two kind of leading key reasons. And if also, I mean, I'll let you expand on this, but just one final thing. I think if you take the example of the coffee experience, when you go and you're served by a barista, and there's a lot of theatre, there's a lot of skill that barista has to make you the perfect coffee. And it's just not good enough to have a tea bag in a cup anymore. There's a lot more expectations from consumers.
Okay, Emilie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, just to say that obviously I completely agree with everything Oscar said in terms of that kind of macro trend of kind of health and wellness and it's certainly experience, which we'll talk, I think, consistently about today. But the other thing I think that's really interesting, that's kind of, I guess, a happy backdrop for us that work in tea is the kind of provenance and flavour trends. So obviously, I'm sure many of you listening are coffee operators and work with coffee and are used to working with coffee. And in coffee, the kind of much cited third wave, which I know is probably a thing of the past now, given where we're at now. But obviously that was kind of fast and furious cappuccinos, and they were sort of pushed aside for what's now termed as specialty coffee shops. And it was them that kind of elevated the coffee bean from kind of commodity to artisanal food stuff. And that obviously is something that meant that we started to kind of notice where beans are from. We started to care about the techniques in producing them kind of at origin. We cared about the roasting profiles and what impact that had on flavour. And obviously we also focused on kind of how it's been brewed, and therefore, again, what that's going to result in terms of flavour in my cup as a customer. So all of a sudden, customers are starting to look for more than just a caffeine hit or a cup of coffee. They're looking for something that's more exciting, more delicious, perhaps different and unusual. But again, most importantly, an experience. And the same trend can be seen in beer and spirits. Obviously, beer is a great example and kind of something that I talk about quite a lot, because I think it's a very interesting, similar industry where in the UK particularly, we really clung to kind of this history of drinking large volumes of relatively poor quality liquids. And therefore it took a really long time for kind of the UK palate to accept that actually there might be something more exciting. And all of a sudden, obviously, craft beer, I don't need to tell you, is now beyond kind of booming. So customers, again, are looking for craft producers. They're looking for that story, that origin, that kind of understanding where it's from, how it's been made, and ultimately why that then affects their flavour experience and the variety and the exciting kind of experience that they can have through that beer. So they're much more likely to choose kind of have one really great beer than 5 watered down, not particularly exciting beers just for the sake of drinking them. So tea actually, I think, has again quite a similar thing in that respect, because obviously we're used to drinking historically lots and lots of tea, and tea was just hot and brown and strong, and it was something that we just kind of did as a part of our DNA. And it's now finally this kind of across the board relentless quest for taste and experience that has now kind of fallen into tea, and tea has been no exception. And therefore that reliance on standard black teas and nothing more is a thing of the past. People are expecting higher quality teas. They're willing to pay for them. And that means kind of, everything from floral greens to their breakfast tea to herbal infusions. So they're expecting that variety. They're wanting a diversity of tea types. They want to know it's been produced correctly. And all of that means that those long ingrained kind of value perceptions around tea are being shaken off, and people are, as I say, not only willing to pay for it, but they're actually expecting to pay for something much better. So it's kind of no longer acceptable to kind of give them a poor quality experience.
Okay. Does anyone else have any more comments, or should we move on to the next topic?
Well, I just think, you mentioned about the kind of the craft beer, but it's similar with the coffee experience as well. Mm-hmm. We've got a lot to thank the coffee industry for, and anybody knows coffee and the barista community and the power that they gave to the growth of specialty coffee knows that they were supported by the SCA. There was a community and there's an education program. Well, specialty tea is also following suit. So the European Specialty Tea Association was formed 3.5 years ago. It's an inclusive member-owned association, and essentially it's an organisation member-owned, but raising the bar of tea. So professionals have come around from all around the world to kind of say, this is the standard, this is what we're looking at, this is the teaching, and it's there's a lot of myth busting around it. Although tea isn't complicated, it should have some guidance. I know, Emilie, you're going to talk about how to get it right later. I joined this organisation a couple of years ago, but now there's 53 country members, 70 plus volunteers. It's completely voluntary run. So, for example, if you're on the island of Ireland, well, there's 25 trained trainers. If you're on the island of Ireland, if you're in Belfast or Dublin, you come to Suki and take part in courses like Tea and Hospitality, which elaborates on what we're talking about today a bit more, the introduction to tea, or you can get really geeky and just look at the plant itself, Camellia sinensis or botanicals. So that education is following, and I think there's a huge demand for that, and baristas are kind of taking a sidestep to skill up and learn about this wonderful drink.
Okay, perfect. So I think we can go on to the next topic, which is topic 2, and that is the opportunity for tea in your business. So Oscar, what would you like to say about the opportunity of tea in the business?
Okay, so there's huge opportunity. What's it going to mean to the bottom line? What does it mean to the consumer? I'm always focusing on the consumer. What's their journey, and what do they like? But again, I looked at this Allegro report. There's quite a lot in it, but the overarching feeling for consumers and when they look at tea is that tea is disregarded in most places. This is the message that's coming from it. A minimum wage just to keep them going, almost a second thought. And I think with, Emilie, I'm sure you found this on your journey when you talk to coffee shops who want to kind of upgrade. You have a look at a disparity between the quality of what's being served in coffee and food and then tea as this afterthought. So that's what we're looking to fix. You talked about variety. Tea can be so diverse. And of course, it offers a lot of seasonal opportunity as well. But I think the main opportunity for tea is to improve your overall offer. So if you get tea right, whether it's in-house service with the ritual of being served proper tea in-house, or if it's for takeaway, then it props absolutely everything on the menu up. If you get it wrong, then people will be asking questions on what else you're skimping on. And there's often this big disparity between, you've got the I hear so often, well, we're a coffee-focused cafe. But I mean, I think actually it's a customer-focused cafe, and it's just about addressing the balance. And you want to bring that quality of tea up to everything else that you're really proud of, and be proud of that tea. I also picked up on the report from July that the preference for consumption in cafes out of home tea beverages was in store. So 68% of coffee shop visited would rather sit in and have their cup of tea at home. And I know we've got to recognise that a lot of operators had to shift to takeaway tea. So I think it's just as important to get your in-house service right, just as much as it is your takeaway tea as well. Like, the other opportunity is for margin. So your overheads are the same. Whatever you've got on your menu, your overheads are the same. You've got the same bills, slightly higher these days. I've never understood why it's acceptable just to take less margin for tea. And I think that's just a historic sticking point on the price of tea. It's got to be, why is it £1 lower than most coffees or something like that? So tea consumers crave authenticity, story, and they want a memorable experience. Emilie, you touched on this earlier about, people are willing to pay for that experience as well. Now, there's a £2 cap ceiling on traditional tea. I'm talking about a tea bag in a mug here. With the average in the UK is £1.85. Now, specialty tea is achieving £3.50 plus. In London, outside that, around £2.50. And if consumers want that and they're designing that, and you're going to get more margin, so there's huge opportunity for everybody. We did an experiment with our customers, and you've got customers who just have tea bag tea. Then they've got customers who might have a tea bag and then some fancy loose leaf teas. Or you've got customers who have committed to specialty tea. And we noticed that there was a 10% increase if people moved everything to loose leaf tea or specialty tea. But what we found, which was a really interesting point, was that 50% of the rest of the range, 50% hike on the rest of the range. So we put that down to people going, right, okay, well, this is how good black tea can be. This is how good my everyday tea can be. I might try the rest of the range. And so it broadens out the overall sales. Again, propping up your whole tea range, not just some specialty teas for the sake of it, but really committing to it. And you also have an opportunity to increase spend in the afternoon. So a high percentage of the day's takings will be from the first few hours. You've got, so we did the survey that's come back from takings in the UK. Before 10 a.m, you're going to take, this is on tea sales, you're going to take 14% of your takings for tea. Then between 10 and 12, it's 34%. Lunchtime, 12 to 2, 18%, and then afternoon, 29%. So you've got this opportunity to upsell good tea in the afternoon if you market it well, if you have the right signage around the cafe and have all those pointers in the right place. So how are you going to do this? This is over to you, but essentially it's a clear menu with good choice, serving a quality product, and with consideration how it's served to the customer. Back to the customer, what do they want from their tea experience? And of course, one last thing is there's an opportunity to bring in loyalty as well. So you're creating this experience. And if you have a retail side with your a retail version of the product or the kit that's being used as well, then you can allow that customer to recreate it at home, and that does bring loyalty. It brings people back, and it kind of creates a full circle.
Okay, great. Emilie, so Oscar mentioned that you it's your bugbear as well. So is there anything that you'd like to explain about how to maximize the opportunity in your business?
Sure. So I will share with you my thoughts, which I hopefully I'm sure Oscar will agree with the same pain points. So a few ways to kind of make sure that you are maximising that opportunity that Oscar just outlined. And I really do agree that tea is, regardless of how you yourself feel about tea, it is absolutely an opportunity sitting there that is incremental revenue for your business, and it's a really exciting one, but also a kind of a really important one, a significant one for, we're at a time when we're looking to kind of look for further ways to help our bottom line, particularly with further challenges. I really think tea is a fantastic opportunity, even setting aside how wonderful it can be as well. So in order to how to maximize that, so few key things. Tea itself, obviously, It's the first thing to get right. Finding a great tea supplier who can support you with great quality whole leaf teas that are obviously carefully sourced and perhaps most importantly full of flavour. You could do everything else right, but if you've got poor quality tea, then there's only so far you'll get. And it might be tempting to think that the customers won't notice, but they absolutely will. A delicious kind of flavoursome cup is not only going to sort of surprise and delight your customers because they've all too often been served a poor quality tea, it is also what will keep them coming back time and time again. And we know this because we actually acquire a huge amount of customers, of our at-home customers, via food service. So people will say, I went into this hotel or this cafe and had a fantastic cup of tea, and then I asked them who it was from, and then I looked you up, and then now I'm buying it for home. We get those emails all the time, and those customer messages all the time. So therefore people really do notice a great experience, and they really will thank you for choosing the great leaves. But so it all starts with the tea. You've got to have good tea. Second, big component of a cup of tea is water. So hopefully those of you who do work in coffee will know, as well as I do, that a critical part of any good coffee or tea is the quality of the water. So firstly, and as an absolute minimum, you need freshly drawn, oxygen-rich, filtered water to ensure kind of that really lively, flavoursome cup. So again, you've got these fantastic leaves. You need to make sure that you're extracting the best possible flavour from them. If you're in London, then obviously you will be familiar with the fact that we have very hard water. And the key to good tea is actually getting it as close to kind of neutral as possible, to pH 7 as possible. So not too alkaline, not too acidic. Hard water is alkaline, tends to produce a very thick, chalky cup of tea, and actually can sometimes even taste quite metallic. It's also slow and inefficient at extracting flavour, so it takes a really long time to kind of extract that flavour. Soft water, on the other hand, is acidic, is very, very efficient at extracting flavour, and therefore tends to over-extract, if anything. So you get kind of slightly bitter, sometimes astringent cups of tea. So trying to get that happy balance is really worthwhile. So wherever you are in the country, understanding your water and the issues that you might have, or the mineral content that you might have, and then making sure that you've got a filter and the correct setting to ensure that you're getting the best possible quality that's suitable for your area is paramount. The slightly tricky thing is that if you have a coffee setup, which I'm sure many of you do, it might be that you've actually got reverse osmosis or even a magnesium enhanced filter, which can be great for coffee. Magnesium in particular has been a particular preference of late. Unfortunately, those aren't actually ideal for tea. So it's better than having unfiltered water. So it's definitely better than nothing, but it's a sort of new challenge that we're facing where really they are not extracting the flavour as well as they could be if there was a dedicated water supply for that tea. So I appreciate that not everyone's able to do that, but in an ideal world, and where we ultimately want to get to, is that we would have a separate filter or separate water delivery system for that tea to ensure that we've got the kind of the right setting and the right setup for that. But yeah, so getting tea right, got to get the water right. Then the setup. So this will depend obviously entirely on your operation. You might be a small kind of train station outlet. You might be a sitting cafe, restaurant, hotel lobby, much bigger. But the space you have will obviously kind of determine how sophisticated your setup can be. But the main thing you do need to have is a good, consistent water delivery system, and that should not come from the coffee machine. Caveat, obviously, there are all sorts of very new, amazing coffee machines that perhaps do have whole setups for this alongside. But what we don't want to see is people using steam ones to produce super hot water / steam being dispensed over a tea bag, because that will almost certainly result in a kind of certainly on anything less than a black tea, a slightly over extracted cup of tea. So Marco, that's where Marco actually come in. They've got a fantastic simple countertop. Well, they've got a range of simple countertop hot water delivery systems. Even just one of their kind of simple setups is great, because it at least means you've got a dedicated supply and it can be kind of set at the right temperature setting. Even better is their mix tap, which has temperature control, so you can have actually 3 temperatures set from the off, which are, again, if you're able to do that, they're hardly any counter space at all, and they make it unbelievably easy because you don't have to have jugs and temperature controls and anything like that for your setup. You can actually do it really neatly and efficiently. So again, that setup is getting it right in whatever way you're able is what's going to help you have a really seamless operation behind the bar, but also a consistent cup of tea for the customer. Teaware or serviceware. So again, this is slightly going to depend on exactly what your operation is, but this is possibly where that opportunity that Oscar spoke about can really come from, and where that kind of repeats coming back time and time again is born, basically. So elevating that customer experience from just the bag in a mug to a teapot is already a really important start. So you might have infusers behind the counter that you use to brew the tea, and then you remove the leaves and deliver just the infusion to the customer. Or you might give the teapot, if you're a kind of fast-paced operation, quite often you might be delivering the teapot to the customer and then letting them control the infusion and remove the leaves themselves. Whichever way you do it, it's not only about brewing that delicious cup of tea and making sure that it tastes right. Obviously, that is critical to making sure that, you know, if you are using loose teas, for example, they've got plenty of room to move around to extract the best possible flavour. But actually, again, it's all about that experience, and the fact that the customer has to perhaps interact with the leaves by removing them. They have to put their own milk in. They have to pour their mug of tea or their cup of tea and perhaps top themselves up. All of that adds up to a positive tea experience, which means not only are they going to be a happy customer and hopefully a loyal customer, they're also going to be very happy to pay, as Oscar says, kind of upwards of £3.50 in London, certainly so much more than they would be for something that they see as what they would make at home. So that cup of tea then becomes a kind of tea moment and an experience. And as I say, they'll want to do it hopefully time and time again. Then the last 2 points are staff engagement. So again, don't need to tell anyone that works in coffee that baristas are absolutely critical to the operation. But actually, although tea is not complicated, it does need a few things to be right. And I think, again, it's all about delivering a delicious and consistent cup of tea. The way to kind of do that is twofold. I think first it's that engagement in the tea offering itself. So that's just making sure that your team all know what it is you're serving, why it's good, why it's better, the fact that it's whole leaf, what the menu is made up of. So these are the teas we have, and these are what they are all, you know, a few buzzwords at least, and knowing, understanding what those teas are and what occasion they might be suited for. So things like these are caffeine free, or this is a nice floral green tea. This is a nice strong breakfast tea if you want to put some milk in. Understanding those teas, having hopefully ideally tried them, perhaps even have a few favorites is really important and has a huge impact on kind of sales within tea, because they'll be understanding from the off that there's experience here and there's added value, and hopefully they'll also be pointed to a tea that they're going to like. And then secondly, just that team will need to understand how to make sure that tea is delicious. So that comes down to, again, all of the things we talked about, like getting the water right, making sure that they're brewing it for the right time, perhaps using the right temperature where necessary, getting the dosing right. And for that, they'll need a little bit of training. So again, it's not as technical as coffee training. They don't need to use machinery, but it does need to be consistent across the operation. So whatever that dose is for a breakfast pot needs to be the same, so that the customer comes in time and time again, they are getting that same delicious cup of tea that they had the first time. And I've certainly seen, I'm sure Oscar has as well, that having kind of one or two ambassadors within your team behind the bar who understand it, engage with it, understand that it's as important to get these things right as it is for your coffee offering, is the difference between giving a great customer experience and a less good one. And it's all you need. And actually, ultimately, that's what will, just those one or two people that can kind of be the sort of tea ambassador within the team will make sure that you're giving a kind of a really consistent experience, and ultimately will have an impact on sales too. Finally, the menu, which is my latest painful bugbear, which Oscar's going to tell you a wonderful anecdote why it's been worth me being so aggravated about. But it's replacing the single word tea at the bottom of a menu. So all of these things I've talked about up until this point, so many of our customers are getting right. Obviously, you know, we're working with them. They've chosen to work with a dedicated tea supplier. They've chosen to get all this right. They've chosen to pay a premium for better tea and give their customers that great experience. Perhaps they've chosen fantastic teaware to go alongside it. And then at the very last hurdle, they fall at the actual chance of realizing that opportunity, which is that they put just tea So cappuccino, latte, long black, Americano, whatever it might be, long list of coffees, and then just tea. So at that point, the final customer touch point, when they're able to place their order, they have no idea whether that's a tea bag in a mug or not. They have no idea what that price point correlates to, and whether that's going to be an experience or something that's going to leave them disappointed. And they also have to then engage and ask what teas are on offer in order to be able to understand whether or not it's something that piques their interest. So really making sure that if you've done all that hard work, that you're actually going to kind of cross the line and convert those into tea sales is absolutely critical. But as I say, Oscar will tell you a wonderful reason why that really does matter.
Well, it was my bugbear as well, because of everything you mentioned. You know, it's that last hurdle. And we did an experiment. We were looking at how to remove barriers for tea sale. So we did this experiment in Dublin a few years ago. And we wondered what would happen if you removed every single mention of coffee, because people know what a macchiato is and a cappuccino these days. So we said, right, well, we'll just go heavy on all tea. So there was an A-frame outside. We sell loose leaf tea. There's a little window decal, loose leaf tea available here. And then all of the coffee signage was removed to have 12 teas in glass jars with the name of each tea. And then it was repeated with chalk on a wall coming down the side of the till as well. And that was it. That was the only signage, the only thing. The tea was in jars, so you could see it. It was visible. We said, look, you know, this is an experiment. If it goes pear-shaped, we'll look after you. And we thought, we'll give it 3 months and see what happens. And in 3 months, without cannibalizing the coffee sales, we matched tea sales 50-50. Now, they ended up putting their signage back to a 50-50 split, and they leveled out around 35% tea sales. But if we're averaging 15 to 20 at the moment, there's huge opportunity. And it's just about signposting that journey for the customers they go in. There was a report a while back saying that, and this was Allegra 2021, saying that 50% of people who go into a coffee shop don't know what they want. And if you've got a barrier, it would be really nice to say, well, tea is just a conversation to encourage. You know, we want our baristas to know everything about it and encourage that. But actually, it's just creating a barrier. So signposting, get the menu right, be proud of what you sell.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, it was only one cafe, but it's
still one great example anyway.
Yeah, it was a delight to do.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're going to move on to Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, just pop them in the Q&A box and we'll be happy to answer them.
Emer, are you going to read them?
Yeah, I'll read them. Don't worry about it. Okay, so the first one I have here is, you mentioned that you can achieve a higher cash margin per serve. Can you elaborate on this? So who'd like to take this one?
I will, if that's okay. I think I mentioned it. So yeah. So if you take an average, I mean, this is really kind of looking at a coffee shop. But if you take a 25-seater with 25 serves a day, and you upgrade from that £2 to £2.60, or essentially looking around 60p cash margin for that whole service. People are getting 2 cups regularly. There's a lot more experience around it. And to get that higher margin, you need to offer them that better product. That, on the bottom line at the end of the year, that works out at £5,000. So it's quite simple, really, to look at what the opportunity is for better margin, for better profitability. I think we did see tea being cut on a few places during the pandemic, and we're having conversations about getting that back with a couple of cafes at the moment. It seemed to be the first thing to go. They were looking at cutting costs, but the opportunity is long term is to close the barrier with the quality on that coffee and tea, and raise the going back to the first point, it's just raising the bar for tea and offering the consumer the product that they're looking for.
Okay. I have another question here, which says, the specialty tea revolution has been flagged for many years, but growth seems to slow compared to the beast that is coffee menu. What is the growth over the past 5 years and the trajectory over the next 5 years for tea?
Tough question. Oscar, I'm happy to talk a little bit. I don't have the stats as to what I expect the growth to be over the next 5 years and what it's been over the last 5 years, but perhaps Oscar might have more stats to that effect. But certainly I can say that having been here for 10 years, I agree with you that these things take time, but it's also worth remembering that Starbucks started this movement for coffee, that we now obviously, perhaps we shun the way they do things, but certainly Starbucks was responsible in some part for kind of coffee getting its new badge from kind of instant coffee to something greater and something that came from a bean, which was something that they didn't even know back in the 80s when that started out. It's still such early days for tea. So we've sort of got this funny trend where we've learned so much from coffee and from other food and drink areas, and therefore we understand that provenance matters. We understand that we want to care about our things that we eat and drink. We understand all of these things better, but we haven't really had that kind of journey, that incremental journey, to get us there and to get the customer there. So customer expectations are starting to change, but people still are used to getting something terrible in a cafe and they just accept it because that's always the way it's been. And similarly, supermarkets have actually got a huge amount to answer for in this respect, because just in the same way that you will see in supermarkets now, it's starting to sort of see that specialty coffee can exist in that environment, because there has been enough of a kind of the kind of price per cup journey for the customers there, so they can start at something really basic and they can slowly kind of trade up and up and up and try something new and get a flavor for something good and then try something better and then try something better until they get to the kind of the really premium stuff at the top. That's been a really natural progression, and there are, as I say, kind of increments in terms of 20p, 50p that they're needing to pay to upgrade to try the next round. In tea, we're sort of still stuck in an instant tea era that we were back in the 80s for coffee. We've still got the absolute large majority, certainly in a sort of in-home experience in the supermarket shelf, a wall. If you go into a real supermarket, I'm not to say real because actually I assume that everyone shops online, but I'm sure plenty of people do. But if you go into a real supermarket and see a wall of tea, there is an absolute domination of big brands that are selling essentially commodity tea, and all of the kind of innovation and NPD has been in pack sizes. So we're going to have 80 tea bags, we're going to have 120 tea bags, we're going to have a slightly different version of the same thing, and every single tea buyer within those categories understands that they need to be upgrading and taking that customer on a journey. But we've got such a legacy of commodity tea that to take, if you see tea pigs sitting on a shelf, you've got one or two tea pigs at £4 something, and you've then got the entire rest of the tea range sitting there at sort of £1 something. So there's a real disconnect, which just will take time. It needs a lot more brands like Oscars and I. It needs a lot more focus on specialty. It needs more hospitality operators more than anything, actually, because that's kind of where it starts. Serving great tea, showing kind of how good the experience can be, allowing people to get a taste for it. And only then will they then kind of demand it and then start thinking, actually, this tea I'm drinking at home is rubbish. And actually, therefore, when I go out, I expect something better. And that slowly starts to take hold. And I can say, as I say, I have no stats, I'm afraid, to hand about what the growth has been over the last 5 years and what it expects to be. But firstly, Oscar and I wouldn't be working as hard as we are if we didn't think it wasn't going to do something very exciting. But I can also say that within the last 10 years that I've been doing it, it's unrecognizable, the kind of the interest, the demand. I mean, it's, I'm lucky enough to say my business is growing fast because there are lots of people that are kind of converting to that. So it just does take time. I hope that answers it, or isn't just a rant.
Yeah, no, I think that was pretty good. I have another review. Oh, sorry, Oscar, if you want to have another go.
No, answer perfectly. So I've got 2021 stats. So tea global. This is global. So global tea is due to rise around 4% in the next 5 years, the next 4 years now. Whereas specialty tea, and this is from multiple sources because there's not one report on tea in general. So 15.9% specialty tea worldwide is growing at 15.9%. So although you've got a very slow, kind of steady and very secure, solid tea market, it's the specialty part that's growing. But if we look to Europe, and I don't have UK or Irish stats, it's Europe in general, it's growing at 29%.
Okay.
So it's 2021.
Perfect. Okay, so we've only got about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to run through the next couple of questions we have here. So one here I have is, how do you suggest to start composing a good and attractive menu for the first time, as well as for a cafeteria and a restaurant? Thanks.
I'm happy to
Jump in, Emilie.
I think it completely depends on exactly what your setup is, and whoever you're working with on the tea, I'm sure will be able to help you with that, kind of particularly bespoke to where you are and who your customer is. But I think as a kind of go-to menu, you probably want to be looking to sort of 5 to 6 teas to give yourself a decent range. If you're able to have more, great, but make sure that you've got kind of, I guess, 5 to 6 to make sure that you've got enough diversity of types. You definitely want to include in there some herbal infusions. So that's the kind of caffeine free, whether it's a peppermint or a chamomile or something more unusual, but make sure you've got kind of a few of those go-tos. And obviously you will probably always need to have, unless you're a very brave operator, a breakfast tea of some kind and an Earl Grey of some kind. I know that from experience. I didn't have an Earl Grey at the very beginning, and I got in trouble for it from a lot of customers. So eventually we developed one. So make sure you've got a breakfast tea, make sure you've got an Earl Grey, make sure you've got at least one green tea, and then herbal infusions as you see fit for your operation. And then obviously there's a world of excitement that you can go beyond that, but I think making sure you've got those would probably be my recommendation.
Okay, perfect. Oscar, do you have anything to add?
No, yeah, it's just that world of excitement part. You know, if you look at, you've got a core menu that's going to be fixed, get your menu right, and then you can look at matcha and chai. You know, matcha and chai are part of that tea menu, as well as something seasonal as well. Bring some diversity into, and have you can have a constantly changing tea menu without having to do much at all.
Okay, great. Okay, let me see if I can get one more question here. So it says here, cold drinks are matching hot drinks in the high street, driven by cold brew coffee and the drift from Coke's, Pepsi's sugar offerings. Is there a cold tea revolution, such as bubble teas, etc.?
Yes, there is a cold tea revolution. Suki, I think, actually even has dabbled in cold tea. I'm obsessed with iced tea, and I know that iced tea is it's tricky in the UK, trickier than it is elsewhere in the world because we don't have the weather for it. But I know and can tell you categorically from within our own customer base that the demand for iced tea recipes and iced tea is growing every year, and it's a fantastic answer to the drift from Cokes and Pepsi's sugary offerings. It's super exciting. It's really versatile. It can be incredibly high margin, and it's delicious and different and easy to make. And you've probably already got the tea in your own cafe sitting there that you can then turn into a fantastic, delicious drink. And on a hot day, an A board outside saying iced tea, customers will be coming in their droves.
Yeah, Oscar, any?
I'll just highlight easy to make. I think that's the key, that people trip over thinking that tea is complicated. There's a bit of guidelines, but any good tea supplier is going to guide you through that, how to maximize that. Emilie said you've already got the tea probably sitting in your range. It's just how to turn that when the weather turns, just to be able to turn that on instantly.
Okay, so that's the end of our Q&A session. Thank you so much for attending. And if you have any other questions, please, you can email Emilie at goodandpropertea.com and Oscar Woolley at owoolley@sukitea.com. And I'll be putting this on our social medias once again. So if anyone who didn't watch the whole thing or knows anyone who does want to watch it but couldn't attend, it'll be up there by tomorrow or the next day. So thank you so much for attending, and I'll see you at the next one.
Thanks very much.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Emma.